Hello and welcome to the Oxford University Press International Women's Day event that we're hosting today for all of you that are tuning in from the UK and around the world. I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting this session for what is going to be an incredibly interesting subject. Now, every year on the 8th of March, the world celebrates International Women's Day, and it's a day that really celebrates everything from the social, economic, cultural and political achievements of women worldwide through to those who are aspiring to do more from the grassroots level up to the boardroom. Every year there is a different theme for each day, and this 2021's theme is Choose to Challenge. It's calling on people to challenge and call out for gender bias, discrimination, stereotyping, all with the aim to really drive positive change for the better. Now, this year, as part of the ongoing commitment to support International Women's Day, Oxford Languages, part of the Oxford University Press, is running a very special panel discussion where we're going to be exploring the topic of sexist language in the dictionary. It follows on from a previous petition against our dictionaries about some of the example sentences and synonyms used in relation to the word woman. And so, given the title of the year's theme is Choose to Challenge, we have a rather intriguing title, and that is Bitch, Bint and Maid, exploring sexist language in the dictionary. Now, we're going to be talking about a whole host of different subjects, and we've got an expert panel who are here today who will be exploring everything from how and why specific words are used in the dictionary, as well as how we can actually really look at language when it comes to pointing to broader societal trends, not only in business, but also in wider society. I am delighted to welcome all of you here today to join this session, and absolutely thrilled to be welcoming very shortly some incredible women to this virtual stage that we are on. My name is Layla Mackenzie-Dellis, and I'm the founder and the CEO of Dial Global. We are proud to be supporting this event. Dial stands for Diverse, Inclusive, Aspirational Leaders, and for us, it's about really moving that holistic dial in the right direction when looking at multiple intersectional facets that really drive fruitful change now and for future generations of leaders. Without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce Catherine Martin, the head of product at Oxford Languages. Catherine Connor-Martin was a lexicographer at Oxford University Press for more than 15 years, working as both an editor on the historical Oxford English Dictionary and Oxford's current English dictionaries, with a speciality in American English. She's now head of product at Oxford Languages, and before joining the OED, Catherine actually studies history at Yale University and the University of Iceland. Wow. Eleanor Mayer, executive editor for the Oxford English Dictionary. Eleanor's actually a lexicographer for the Oxford English Dictionary and was responsible for the dictionary's revision group, who revise, update and expand OED content to make sure entries give the most clear, concise, most accurate account of a word's meaning, history and development. We also have Helen Taylor. She's the Emeritus Professor of English and is also at the University of Exeter. Now, Helen Taylor is a professor, honorary fellow of the British Association of American Studies, and Leverhulme Emeritus Fellow from 2016 to 18. She's taught English, American literature at the University of Bristol, West of England, Warwick and Exeter where she was actually head of the School of English there. She's published widely on English and American literature, culture, and has curated many literary festivals. She's the first director of Liverpool as well, and she's got a number of publications that include everything from Scarlet's Woman and Gone with the Wind for all of our female fans and male fans who are here today as well. And last but never least, Dr. Sarah Olgave, the Senior Research Fellow in the Faculty of Linguistics, Philology and Phonetics at Harris Manchester College, University of Oxford. Now, Sarah's a Senior Research Fellow in the Faculty of Linguistics and Phonetics at the University of Oxford, where she's also the Director of the Dictionary Lab, a research initiative applying digital tools and methods to the study of language and dictionaries. She's the author of Words of the World, a global history of the Oxford English Dictionary, and has taught linguistics at Stanford University, Cambridge, and the Australian National University as well. She was director of the Dictionary Centre and also chief editor there as well. I have to say, wow, I'm already getting a significant amount of imposter syndrome here, just being able to introduce these marvellous women. Now, without further ado, I'd love to get into some of the nuts and bolts of the session and hear a little bit about each of our panelists and, you know, ultimately how they came to be where they are today. And before we dive in deep, Catherine, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do and how you came to be where you are today in a brief nutshell, and we'll do a little round robin because I know we've had a couple of technical difficulties for some of our panelists. So let's get into a round robin and then we'll get into driving the conversation.
Well, my background, I studied history, but I was fortunate enough when I had just gotten out of university and was looking for my next direction to find myself at the Oxford English Dictionary, which really aligned with my interests a lot. And I was a lexicographer, so writing and researching dictionaries for about 15 years. But in the past several years, I've taken a move into more of a product and business direction. And so now I'm the head of the product team here. So looking at what our users and customers want from dictionaries and having that lens instead of the lens of the writer.
Thanks so much, Catherine. And Eleanor?
I started at the OED in 2006 after studying classics at university. When I applied, we were given an aptitude test with some of the tasks that lexicographers would do on the job. And I absolutely loved doing the test and was really excited to think this is what I would do as a lexicographer at the Oxford English Dictionary. And the first word I worked on, one of the first words was rabbit, which was great fun. And I've been at Dictionary for many years and at the moment responsible for the revision group. So we update the existing text of the dictionary because the first edition of the Oxford English Dictionary started in 1884. So we update these entries to make them up to date, expanded with the latest evidence and tools at our disposal.
Fantastic. I have to say, I love the word lexicographer. I did worry somewhat because I'm a little bit, well, I'm quite dyslexic actually, and I thought, oh my goodness, how to pronounce, but wonderful to have you here. Professor Helen. Have we got Helen? Is she here yet?
I think she's still having some technical difficulties, but she will join us soon as she can.
Problem at all. And so we'll come to Dr. Sarah with the fantastic bookcase behind her.
Taylor, thanks. Yeah, well, I started in a different field. I started in mathematics and computer science and then studied linguistics. So I've always had a foot in the practical side of lexicography, working as a lexicographer and also teaching in academia.
Well, thank you all very much indeed for joining. And for those that are tuning in, please do start to ask questions. We are monitoring the chat at all times, so make the opportunity of asking questions and getting involved in the debate with the wonderful women that we have here today. So starting things off then, and looking at the dictionary and the use of language and different meanings, why do we think collectively that the language of the dictionary seems to be so sexist? Should we have this word bitch ever? Should this have been listed underneath the word woman? What are the thoughts here? Because I know it's rather controversial, and as I say this word bitch, I'm also kind of wincing a little bit, yet at the same time I know there are many different meanings for that word, including a female dog, of which I have too. Catherine, I'm going to come to you to answer.
Sure. Well, the simple answer is bitch is a quite common word in English. And so factually, we certainly need to have a dictionary entry for the word bitch. It's similarly common to words like volcano or eyelid or niece, and so it would be absurd not to treat one of those words in the dictionary. And when we make a decision to include a word in the dictionary, we also want to show the full range of meanings that it has, because that's part of what we do as lexicographers, is provide this comprehensive analysis of the word's use. And so to not show any aspect of that word's use would be akin to censorship. So the slide you're seeing now, and I want to give Eleanor a chance to talk about these in a bit more detail later. This is the OED's entry. That's a historical dictionary for bitch in that derogatory sense that we know. But there's also a different meaning of bitch. If you go on to the next slide, this colloquial one in neutral or positive use. And that's also a very real meaning of the word bitch. It's like, I think of it as the sorority bitch. Hey, bitches! So that's a real meaning. And the facts of the evidence of the word bitch tell us that this is a real meaning of the word. And so as lexicographers, we deal in facts, we deal in evidence, and then the question is, well, what do you do with these facts and evidence? And I think that what we saw in some of the reactions to the word bitch being included as a synonym of woman was that lexicographers look at their work as a cataloging. We're compiling all of this information. We want to make facts available to the public. And we generally think that the more facts, the better. And if you think about a physical dictionary, a printed dictionary, the more synonyms it has, the more information it has, the better. And at the front of that dictionary, you see these explanations of what was the editorial process, why do they choose things, what do they mean by synonym? But in digital context, you don't always have all of that information. And so I think what we saw with the reception of the synonyms that had been included in our thesaurus being kind of interleafed with dictionary content in various contexts online, people were confused. They didn't know what they were seeing. And I think that was a real learning experience for us as lexicographers to think, well, and for me as a product person to think, well, maybe depending on what the use case is for the data, different things are helpful to show and different things are not helpful to show. So in a context like a scholarly context like the OED, it's absolutely non-negotiable that if something is a common synonym, it should be included. But maybe there are contexts when we have to think about the benefits and disbenefits and weigh them against each other, thinking about what the assumptions of our readers and users are going to be. So that's what I see as the in a nutshell, kind of what's happened with the word, this meaning of the word bitch, why it's controversial, and why it's so challenging for us to balance the facts and the reception.
Absolutely fascinating, and I must say, it does make me smile when I hear the "Hey bitches" with a smiley face. I think this is brilliant. I'm sure there's lots and lots of women who are reading that thinking, "Hey, yeah, that is can be seen in a number of different ways. Any further thoughts here from any of our other panelists?
I think Catherine's quite right, talking about use cases using this dictionary. What dictionary are we using? The title of this talk talks about the dictionary, but actually there is never just such a thing as the dictionary. There's lots of different types of dictionaries. So the Oxford English Dictionary, which I work on, is a massive historical dictionary tracing the meaning of words from Old English to the present day. We have senses that are now obsolete, not in use anymore, to describe the development of the word. We try and include the earliest use of a word. So with this neutral sense of bitch, the earliest use we found so far is from 1785. I should say that these definitions and quotations are from our entry for bitch that's in revisions. So if you go on the OED website, you won't see it like this. But in June, we hope to publish a fully updated version of this entry. So yeah, we have children's dictionaries, we have the Oxford English Dictionary, we have bilingual dictionaries, we have dictionaries in lookup, so on a Kindle or other devices. So I think we have to think about the context, but in the context of the OED, this word should, the sense of the word bitch should definitely be included, and we've got the evidence on the slide to show that it is used in that way. And I think when we talk about why the language of the dictionary seems so sexist, it's because language can be sexist, people can be sexist, and as a descriptive dictionary, we're describing that usage. Doesn't mean we approve of that usage, just as someone writing about slavery or a journalist writing about femicide approves of those things. They don't, but I think we have a duty as scholars to record that, and users want, if they come across, if someone sends them an email saying, hey bitches, they might want to have a look at the word and see what's going on there.
Absolutely fascinating. Thanks so much, Eleanor. And Sarah, any further thoughts? I think Helen is having a couple of technical issues, and so we will move through our questions
Sure.
with our three very superb panelists.
So I was just going to add, that dictionaries are certainly not promoting sexism. They are, as Eleanor and Catherine have said, that they're just describing words that reflect sexist attitudes of speakers who may see women as subordinate to men. And I think it's important to realize that it's not just in obviously pejorative taboo words, but it's also in subtle ways with terms that are never used to refer to men. So you never hear men referred to as certain adjectives like ditzy or feisty or gossipy, bossy, nagging or shrill. So there's definitely a gender bias to certain words, and a good lexicographer is obliged to convey that meaning in the dictionary entry. And I think that, we're all aware of negative words for women that actually have no negative male equivalent. So with that drama with Jeff Bezos having the affair with Lauren Sanchez, I noticed that in most of the media, Jeff was referred to as the lover and Lauren as the homewrecker or the mistress. And if you look at English slang, there are over 3,000 pejorative words for a woman, and then thousands of other pejorative words that refer to women through prostitution, or female body parts is a big part of our slang. So there are 1,500 words alone for the word vagina. And if you analyze a dictionary, say, such as Jonathan Green's Dictionary of Slang, you'll find that all the words referring to women, they outnumber other categories such as crime or drinking or drugs or sex. And then I did just want to mention that there's this recent trend in pejorative words for women, especially for white women, which is worth mentioning, which is the use of female first names. So you may have heard recently that a Karen is a middle-aged racist white mum who wears mum jeans and asks to see the manager when she's in a restaurant, and now she's been refusing to wear a facial mask. And then we've got Becky's. A Becky is a young Karen who's equally entitled, but is more like a new Valley girl. And then you've got Stacey's. A Stacey is kind of like the new slut. They're especially, that it's a white woman who's especially confident in her sexuality. So all these words were born on the internet. Karen and Becky and Stacey, they were born and created on Black Twitter. But the more vitriolic expressions that we find against women, they were mainly created on 4chan and Reddit within subcultures there, such as the incels, who are the involuntary celibate men who blame women for their lack of sex.
Wow. I mean, first of all, unbelievable that there is over 1,500 words alone for the word vagina. I just, that blows my mind, honestly. It really does, and makes me also consider as well, when it comes to you know, white slang, as you mentioned there, and these terms being born on the internet. Where does that sit in terms of actually supporting women and all women up? You know, this is not a zero-sum game, as my dear friend Lord Simon Woolley would say. This is not a, you know, he wins, therefore she loses, she wins, therefore she loses. You know, surely we should be supporting one another, which and whatever background we come from, whether it is that we are a white female, whether it is that we are a you know, a Chinese female who is dyslexic and also you know, comes from a British family, because I was adopted by 2 amazing white British parents. You know, there's a lot of different complexities when you start to actually break it down, but it does make me question you know, how we can be really more inclusive when it comes to our language, and actually driving forward the movement for International Women's Day, which is about lifting each other up, not tearing each other down.
Yeah, well, I mean, unfortunately, one of the main oppositions to that is the fact that women's language seems to be policed within our society. So I really hope that society will stop policing women's language, because that just does not happen for men. So, you know, as women, we're continually told that women talk too much or not enough, that they hedge, or they're tentative, that they lack confidence, or that they aren't authoritative enough when they speak. We're told that we turn everything into questions by rising intonation at the end of our sentences, which linguists call uptalk. And then you had Australian actresses on Neighbours being blamed for uptalk creeping throughout the English-speaking world. We blame women for creaky voice and vocal fry. So that's like the Valley Girls and like your Kim Kardashian, how she uses the vocal fry. So women are demonized for these speech patterns, and we're told that our speech patterns are decaying the English language. But if you look at history, we saw these kinds of similar complaints in the 19th century against the use of foreign words and loan words in English. So we know that these things go in fads historically, but it's still worth asking the question, why are women's voices the focus of these critiques? We saw it last year. You will remember that the head of Uber, when Ariana Huffington said that she was the only woman on the board of Uber and that there should be more, the chair said that that would just result in more talking in the boardroom. And last month there was that instance of the Japanese Olympics committee head saying that women were annoying in meetings because they talk too much. So, but what's interesting is that every one of these criticisms is actually false, right? There are plenty of sociolinguistic studies, including one that just came out in the current volume of Gender and Society, which has come out of Dartmouth College in the States, which shows that the opposite is actually true, that women in classrooms and in meetings actually speak less than men. But these myths are still perpetuated throughout society. And tabloids just last year were blaming women for saying just and like too often. But Mark Lieberman did a study of 12,000 telephone calls and found that men actually say like and just more than women do. And then Penny Eckert at Stanford University, interestingly, she found that middle-aged fathers use uptalk, so they rise at the end of their sentences more than their daughters do. And then we all witnessed that video that went viral last month with Jackie Weaver trying to chair the parish council meeting when one of the older men in that meeting yelled at her very violently and said, "You have no authority to speak, Jackie Weaver." Right. So and I think that as you said, Layla, we need to acknowledge on this panel that black women are often the biggest targets here because of a combination of racism and sexism. And we saw that in the vilification of Rachel Jeantel, if you recall, in the murder case of Trayvon Martin. She was discredited because of her language and her use of Black English vernacular. And this is a real issue. Amnesty found that during the 2017 election, they analyzed abusive tweets and they found that over half of them were directed at one person, and that was the Black MP Diane Abbott. So these kinds of blatant campaigns are all about silencing women, which I'm sure that we'll all speak about more in question time.
I think the poignant word there is myths. A lot of these pieces are myths. And so let's loop back onto this in a moment, because there's so much rich discussion that I can already feel is coming out. But I'd love to give an opportunity to speak to Catherine, who I know is quite keen just to segue on from this before we then move into really why women are told to adopt this deeper pitch when it comes to assertiveness. Very interesting. But Catherine, over to you.
Well, I wanted to make a plea that although obviously the policing of women's discourse and the many aspects of sexism that are enshrined in our lexicon have a negative impact on women, I think they have a negative impact on men as well. And it's useful to kind of draw back the camera and think that the gender binary affects people of all gender identities, and because it's a binary, there tends to be policing of men in opposite directions or different directions. So for all that it's very, very true that there are many more negative terms for a promiscuous woman than for a promiscuous man, there are more negative terms for a man regarded as insufficiently masculine than there are for a woman regarded as insufficiently feminine. And so I think what we as lexicographers and what the dictionary can do is to help expose those very facts, and so that when we're using language, we can be aware of its impact on any group, any identity, and constantly be questioning what are the assumptions that are baked into the words and phrases that we use.
The way that you say baked into makes me think instantaneously of how systemic a lot of these issues are, and how the positivity of language and the responsibility of lexicographers, as you say, really can positively champion and change these norms that we've seen and heard for many, many years. Now, I'm going to move us on slightly, just being conscious of time here, and just see whether there are any thoughts around the promotion of sexism by including such specific terms that we have mentioned, and also whether we should be concerned about these impacts when it comes to women and wider society. Eleanor, I'm going to come to you for this one.
I think as dictionary makers, we have a responsibility to accurately describe how language is used, and that means we should include these sexist terms, we should include these racist terms, but it's really important for us to contextualize them. Therefore, if a term is a derogatory, highly offensive term for a woman, we should say that it's highly offensive, and if there's more going on, as with a lot of words, we can be more discursive and describe how maybe by some people the word has been reclaimed, for other people it's still highly offensive. It's rarely black and white, and so as dictionary makers we have to contextualize, explain what's going on, and dictionary makers haven't always done that in the past, and we haven't always done that, so we need to just think a bit more about it. But I don't think we should exclude these words, and I also think we need to be careful about the example sentences we use. That's something that has caused controversy, as we've seen, about example sentences for various terms which seem to portray women in a particular way. And we have to think, as lexicographers, does this actually reflect the evidence? If it does reflect the evidence, then maybe we should include that. Or are we including an example sentence that's highly insulting to women, which doesn't reflect the evidence, and there's no reason for us to do that, as it's a completely neutral term we're defining anyway? I think Catherine could talk a bit more about our example sentences. So I'm not sure, I think when we talk about promoting sexism, I don't think we are doing that because we're describing how language works. But if people think we are, then maybe that's a wider conversation about the language in the wild, or what dictionaries are for, how we use them, and what readers' expectations are of those dictionaries. And maybe we need to do a better job of explaining what our dictionaries are.
Yeah, I think just following on from what Eleanor said there, I think that dictionaries are actually not that powerful. I can't imagine that there are trolls on 4chan and on Parler who are reading the OED for their next term of abuse. If they do, then I think that they're going to be disappointed, because the OED has many archaic pejorative words and obsolete words for women. So, you know, you think about it, in the 17th century, the equivalent of slut was a grass, and in the 18th century, the equivalent was a mot. Well, those words have no valency now whatsoever. And I think that just reminds us here, which is really important to keep in mind, that language changes across time. So what is derogatory and offensive now won't be for future generations. We might be able to fast track, and Eleanor mentioned that there, that we might be able to fast track this process of semantic change with petitions, or by reclaiming terms of abuse. So, and we've seen some success with the word geek and queer, and slut to a certain extent with the slut marches, and pussy with the pussy hats in the Women's March, which was a reaction against Trump's comment to grab them by the pussy. And the artist Susie Warren of Twist Tweez, she makes t-shirts that are reclaiming words of abuse for women. So Mary Beard chose the word witch for her t-shirt. Sandy Toxvig chose crone, and I chose blue stocking, which is a derogatory term for an intellectual woman who's not good marriage material. So artists are often fantastic at reclaiming words, and I'm reminded here of the artist, of the playwright Eve Ensler. You may have seen her one-woman play, The Vagina Monologues, and that has a really powerful first scene where she takes the C word and she just repeats it over and over until it loses its shock value. So, you know, so keeping in mind that language naturally changes across time, I look forward to the day when an OED editor puts an obsolete marker on a lot of these sexist words, and we've just got to hope that they don't then just automatically replace them with other derogatory terms for women or for some other marginalized gender or subgroup.
You're quite right, Sarah, about the influence of dictionaries. We like to see ourselves as following behind the language makers, writing down what they say, describing it, explaining it. It's very rare, I think, that a dictionary like the Oxford English Dictionary will shape the language that people are using. The language people are using is our raw material for us to describe what's going on.
Indeed, and thanks so much for sharing there. I think what's interesting, just pulling out something that you mentioned, is it is an evolution. I think so much so this is seen as kind of a revolution, you know, against things that have been negative. Now, of course, you know, many terms are absolutely sexist to women and offensive to other communities and non-binary individuals. However, you know, this is a never-ending, living, breathing, sleeping, organic journey that we are on when it comes to all of the rich smorgasbord facets of diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, both visible and invisible. And I wonder whether we can skip ahead a little, because frankly, I could listen to you all speak all day, and I must be careful that we don't spill over too much here. But I wonder, when it comes to choosing to challenge and some of the real positive aspirations for our future and the hope that language can bring when it comes to the perception of women, what are our thoughts? And you know, Ellen, I'm going to loop straight back to you, if that's okay, because I know, as you just mentioned there, you know, it is almost a following with what is happening in the wider world. How much influence can we have as dictionary makers, as language specialists?
I think as dictionary makers, we need to be aware of our own biases and assumptions, our own unconscious biases, our own, in our head, what we think of as the default. Is our default a white man or a white woman, for example? So I think one example is, I was writing a definition the other day and I talked about the bride and bridegroom, and I stopped and thought, that's really heteronormative. And then I did some searching, and the same term was used with references to same-sex marriages. It's just kind of catching yourself and thinking, wait a moment. And I think example sentences as well, we need to be careful about them. I was looking at the entry for women, which I revised many, many years ago, I think in 2009. And the last two example sentences I chose were talked about a slow sensual smile of a woman and a woman wearing hip-hugging jeans. And I think I wouldn't do that now. It's focusing on the woman's appearance. There are so many other examples of the word woman that don't fixate so much on that. So I think just being reflexive, and I think more generally, striving in our recruitment, for example, to be more diverse, striving to be an inclusive workplace as well. I think that's so important, because we all have our own, however much we might try to be objective, we all have our own things to bear on what we're doing. We might not realise that. So the more diverse we can be as an organisation, the more we can mitigate against that as well.
I couldn't agree more, Eleanor. And I think there's also, if we take it back to the evidence, that everything we do in lexicography is about the evidence. But what's the evidence that you're looking at? And so the more that we can do, and it's hard, especially when you're looking historically, you're bounded by who was published, what voices were published, and even in unpublished things, which manuscripts did people choose to take out of the archives and make available to us and digitize. And so making sure that the evidence that we're looking at, that we're using as the basis for our analysis, is bringing in as many different perspectives and voices as possible.
And I think talk about different voices and perspectives, that really hit home when I was researching a lot of regional words, and the evidence we tended to look in things like academic papers or books, newspapers, to find evidence of these words. And we realised that when it came to regional English, a lot of it's spoken. It's not written down, it's people talking to each other, and it's really hard to find the evidence. And so you might think, when assessing whether to include something in the dictionary, oh, it's not common enough. And actually these regional words are so common. And now we've got Twitter, we can go on Twitter and see people using them all the time. And it wasn't that the words weren't common, we were just looking in the wrong place, or at certain points in the history of the dictionary, the only way we could access those words was by looking in older 19th century dictionaries of regional words, assuming that they weren't used anymore. And now we have got more access to Twitter, which does represent spoken language to some extent. We can see the evidence and include it and make sure we are a more inclusive dictionary.
Some really phenomenal points made there, and I know we've made reference to unconscious bias. I suppose my small question here just to consider would be, is this really more about conscious inclusion? And as you've said, you know, almost stopping ourselves to think and to appreciate the fact that this is an evolution. I recently sent out, albeit, you know, not to literary standards of the Oxford University Press, albeit quite lovely and something that I enjoyed when I was younger, were the Mr. Men books. And I'd purchased a number of these Mr. Men books and then thought to myself, hey, hang on a moment, shouldn't it be people books? Question mark, question mark. Yet because I was ordering a number of these as gifts for Lunar New Year, it was one of few that I could see, in particular when it comes to education around children's understanding of what we see in terms of language. Now, just a small example there, because quite easily I could go off straight on a tangent and be talking more about this, but I think where we can be more consciously inclusive of all of these different aspects, the better. Now, the audience are already asking multiple questions, which is wonderful. So I can see them all feeding through. We'll try and get through as many as we possibly can, but I would encourage you all to ensure that you reach out as well to OUP and some brilliant individuals within the organisation. We have a question here that says, what role can men play when it comes to shaping language trends in the future? How can we bring them along the journey and develop these strong male allies? Great question.
I suppose coming back to our talk about defaults, I think men could think about, well, and women as well, the words you're using, are they gendered? What assumptions am I making? What words are marked and unmarked with regards to gender? For example, professions. Why am I talking about WPC? Why not just a PC, a woman police constable in this country? Do I need to specify the gender of the person here? I think a lot of what men can do are also what women can do as well, because women also use sexist language. Women also police other women. So I think, yeah, just be thoughtful about what's the default, what privileges are going on here, and just try to be mindful when you're using language, I think.
Catherine.
Yeah, I think I don't have much to add beyond what Eleanor said, though. I'll put in looking at it from a dictionary maker's perspective. People need to be conscious of what might be hidden inside the words that they choose. Why are you saying bossy, and would you say it about a man as well as a woman? I would challenge us to think about how we can make that kind of context clearer to people when we're making these language references, so that people can make more informed choices about their use of language and understand when there are gendered implications. Sometimes we've gotten critiques from the public about how that suggests that they'd prefer us to erase that bias. So choose an example of bossy where it's a man who's being described as bossy, to erase that bias. But I would argue that it's actually more useful for us to, when there is something where we have evidence of a clear gender distinction, to think about ways that we can make that clear, highlight it, and that can enable allies of whatever gender to think about and be conscious of those implications when they use language.
Interesting. And what about the unprecedented amendment for the definition of woman, which was announced last year following the campaign? has a definition been amended so significantly before, Catherine?
Well, I don't know that I would say that was unprecedented. We're constantly revising our current English dictionaries, and one of the directions that we've gone in recent years is to be more conscious of the general in the editorial world. There's a concept of person-centric language, person-first language. So when we revised the definition of woman, we changed it from saying an adult human female to being a female adult human being. So that's something we've done in a lot of definitions, is to try to pull those kinds of descriptors into the adjective and make the noun something that's more fundamental. So that's part of a general revision that we've been doing. It wasn't necessarily, although there was a campaign that got a lot of attention, that wasn't necessarily what prompted the specific changes we've made. We've recognized in the past, at least 5 years, I'd say, that there's always that paying attention to the way that gender is expressed in various ways in our dictionaries is something that we need to be conscious of. And so there's just ongoing, every year we're making different tweaks and changes and reviewing different things. We actually, went through and reviewed every feminine pronoun that was given in an example sentence one time. And that doesn't mean that you won't find something in the dictionary, in this dictionary, that is perfect. We can always make things better, but we are always trying. We're constantly reviewing, constantly revising, and the revisions that we made in 2020 were just one more step in that ongoing process. And I expect that we'll be making more this year and next year and the year after.
Thank you. And we've got a number of other questions. I'm just conscious of timing. I'm going to ask one more here, and then what I would really love to do, just so people can get off to their 2 o'clocks, is do one final positive thought from each of you. But the last question here, and I'm going to come to Sarah on this one, is what do you think will ultimately it take to reverse the damages made to the English language in terms of the vocabulary used to describe women and/or sexist language?
Well, I don't actually subscribe to the belief that the language has been damaged by that. That is just natural. This is what every language in the world will have, words that are pejorative to some subgroup. So and that's why I do think that it's really important to include men in this conversation. I mean, I can't see who is on this call, but it'd be really interesting to know how many men did sign up to this panel. Because if we do want to reduce the level of verbal abuse towards women, then men certainly need to be a part of the conversation. Sexist language is a male issue, because most of this language is actually used by men, and because language is the key to culture, and sexist language reflects the fact that men hold the majority of power, social, political, and economic power, then to address that power imbalance, that requires a cultural and a political shift, which to do at scale is an absolute challenge. But I do think that there are certain approaches, and I think that the speakers have named those. I think reframing this as a male issue can help in the solving. I think that the motto of today, the Choose to Challenge motto, is really apt here, because sexist language needs to be made socially unacceptable. And every time you hear it, I think each of us needs to be brave and call it out, be an upstander, right, rather than a bystander. I think that we are called to educate children, boys as well as girls, so that they know that pejorative language is not okay. And then I do think that social media plays a huge role in this. And I would even call for the regulation of social media so that abusive language is moderated.
I absolutely concur, And before I do a very brief summary here, Eleanor and Catherine, have you got any further nuggets of wisdom that you'd like to share before we close out today?
I don't think so. Great note to end on.
No, I don't think so either. But in 30 years' time, I'm really excited about what developments will have happened in the language, what sensors new sensors the OED's recording, what sensors we're putting the obsolete dagger on. Yeah, it's really exciting.
Well, thank you all ever so much. Some absolutely superb points from each and every one of you, and thank you to our audience for an array of challenging, positively challenging questions. A final piece from me in terms of summary, and my goodness, there has been so much rich discussion, I almost don't know where to start. But what I will say is, when it comes to men, non-binary individuals, actually, we must involve all in the conversation, in particular with this being International Women's Day. As simplistic as it may sound, we have all come from females, and one might argue, what is the point in preaching to the converted? We must bring others into the conversation. We must drive forth with our positive allies in order to change the face of our future. And what I love that has been mentioned countless times is how we can really lift each other up, how as women championing other women. And when I say that, I mean really championing other women. There's many different idiosyncratic details that make up women from different communities with different backgrounds and different additions to just gender alone. We look at other facets such as race and ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, age, generation, parenthood, caring responsibilities, mental health, through to nationality and even religious and belief systems. You start to see the complexities and the layers of the onion that really do build a picture of how complex diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity is, and in particular why we must continue to shape and evolve language to support our longer term sustainable future when it comes to other generations and other leaders who are willing and wanting to really step up to the plate now and make a difference. Be conscious, be consciously inclusive, and be conscious of the language we're using, and don't be scared is what I would say as well. We've heard the word vilification pop up a couple of times here, and we want to make sure that people aren't scared to be able to speak out and speak up in different environments, because we need to ensure that it is inclusive and we are bringing other people along with this journey who are not fearful to be able to question what certain terminology means when it comes to choosing to challenge, which I think is just a perfect way to describe this day in such a momentous time in history, in the digital world in which we live. We really must be sensitive, I think, and empathetic to the needs of others, and understanding as well, really trying to lift one another up as we go. Now, I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in today, and the Oxford University Press for hosting such a session with such incredibly powerful female leaders on this panel, which I feel truly privileged and honoured to even be chairing a virtual stage here with. Very happy International Women's Day. We would love to stay in touch and love to connect with all of you as well. So do check us out at dialglobal.org, where for us it's about fostering conversation and communities for a better future. Thank you ever so much.